Question number 4, the Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Speaker, this question is to the Minister for Tertiary Education, Skills and Employment, and asks, what plans does the government have in the budget tomorrow to get the 146,000 officially unemployed New Zealanders, as measured by the labour market statistics, into work?
Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Mr Speaker, the government will continue to operate the same sensible economic and fiscal policies which have delivered 194,000 jobs to New Zealanders in 4.25 years, and 23,000 more jobs than the 171,000 jobs forecast by Treasury in Budget 2011, with more than 1 quarter to run. In fact, this government and businesses around the country have delivered job growth in 16 out of the last 17 quarters, and I'm confident the budget tomorrow will project further job growth, and I thank the member for his question.
Supplementary question.
Supplementary question, the Right Honourable Winston Peters.
So, Minister, what are the plans for the government in tomorrow's budget for Maori and Pacific youth, where unemployment has increased by over 40% for Maori and almost 50% for Maori youth? No, I'm not dealing with your specialty rubbish. I'm talking about the facts. Right?
Order.
50% for Maori Pacific, for Pacific youth rather, under this national-led government.
The Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Well, Mr Speaker, I'm not sure about the member's figures, but I certainly would agree with him that Māori and Pacifica youth unemployment is too high. I agree with him. And we've got a number of measures underway alongside the Minister of Māori Development to improve that situation, including, of course, Māori and Pacifica Trades Training, which is a program which is delivering great opportunities for young Māori and Pacifica in the trades around New Zealand. And there may or may not be more information about that in the budget tomorrow.
Supplementary question.
Supplementary question, the Right Honourable.
Can I ask the Minister, how is his government going to be able to claim to be working for all New Zealanders when we have tens of thousands of youth who are currently unemployed, yet his government has approved over 47,200 international student visas with work rights in our current financial year?
Cheap labour. Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Well, Mr Speaker, the member may not be excited about international education, and I'm reasonably confident from all his past statements that he isn't. But international education creates for this country around $2.85 billion worth of value a year and some 33,000 jobs, and a relatively small number of international students actually participate in the employment market. But I thank the member for his question and say that international education is very important for New Zealand's future. You're wrong, Robertson. Ask the question.
Point of order.
Point of order, the Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Speaker, I didn't ask about international education,
Order.
did I?
Yes. Order. The member will resume his seat. If he wants to go back and look, he included in his question about 47,200 people here on student visas. That's the part the Minister chose to...
Point of order.
Point of order. Order.
I specifically said
order.
Student visas with work rights.
Order.
Those are the critical words.
Order. Member, the answer has certainly addressed the question. If it's not to the member's satisfaction, then that may be so. The way forward is to ask concise supplementary questions.
Supplementary question.
Supplementary question, the Right Honourable...
How will tomorrow's budget reduce the NEET or not in education, employment or training rate of youth in Northland, where the rate has now increased to 1 in 5 youths not in employment, education or training since they became the government?
Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Mr Speaker, well, if I was a member, very, very careful about the regional numbers for a small demographic, but nevertheless I agree with him, those numbers are too high, and that's why the government has a comprehensive program to develop economic opportunities that positively affect Northland. For example, the Korean Free Trade Deal and TPP, and would welcome, obviously, the member's support in that regard. And he may scoff, but that's very important to the kiwi fruit farmers and to the meat farmers and dairy farmers of Northland. And also we're encouraging tourism investment, including, of course, the projected investment by the Chinese investor in Carrington Resort. And I look forward to the member endorsing that, because I understand they plan to train up young Northland youth. And also, of course, the Ngāpuhi settlement, and we look forward to the member's positive support of that as well.
Point of order.
Order.
Mr. Speaker, my point of order is that he's not answering the question. My real point is it's no sin relitigating the Northern by-election. We did so badly.
The member, when I rise to my feet, he should resume his seat immediately. That question again was addressed. If the member wants a further supplementary, then he should ask it.
No, point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Point of order.
It's not that the question wasn't in some way addressed. We know what the rules are, but you heard a long tirade and ramble not addressing the question.
Order.
When were you going to act?
Order. If the member knows what the rules are, I suggest he has a look at them. If he can make his questions more concise, I can help him get an answer that might satisfy him. Does the member have a further sub? Otherwise,
yes, I do, as good as the last one. Point of order, Mr. Speaker. Why is the government not filling the 5,000 job vacancies in Christchurch with young, trained Kiwi workers, given that we have 76,000 youth who are unemployed and that we are now in our 5th year since the Christchurch earthquake, instead of getting all the skilled people from offshore?
Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Mr. Speaker, the member needs to come and get a bit of information, because there's actually a lot going on in Christchurch, including, for example, the 3K for Christchurch, which gives people the opportunity to shift to Christchurch. If the member wants to participate in that scheme, I'm sure we could line him up with MSD and get him down to Christchurch so he can wield a hammer. But, Mr. Speaker, we're also doing a huge amount of trades training in Christchurch. BCITO, for example, has record numbers of trainees. And actually, we would welcome more young New Zealanders to take the opportunity to head to Christchurch and, in fact, the whole South Island, which is currently very low levels of unemployment.
Question number 5. Grant